Hello. Apologies if I sound a bit bunged up today. I think I got a bit of hay fever and it's affecting my voice, probably making it a little bit Barry White. I just finished watching Picard Season 3, Episode 8, Surrender. Another really good episode, far more action orientated, although there is a bit of a philosophical conversation within there, and a moral dilemma, but it's one we've seen multiple times before. It's heavily tropey, but the episode's enjoyable enough that it doesn't cause a problem. There's not a huge amount to say spoiler-free on this one. It was an exciting episode, very dark in places. I'm not just talking about visually, because again, visually it was very dark, and those slight horror elements again. So I'll get straight on to spoilers. The episode picks up where we left off last time. Vadic and her crew have taken over the Titan. Picard, Beverly, Jack and Sydney are all together. LaForge, daughter number 2, and the data law android are in engineering. The main story pretty much goes as you'd expect, with Vadic having control, wanting Jack to come to the bridge, and threatening to kill people if he doesn't. She's got complete control of the ship, and it's quite sinister and quite insidious what she does, because she switches off the lights, closes the door, and there's a scene of the crew being massacred. You don't see it, but you hear it, which probably makes it more horrific. Funnily enough, I watched Air Force One before I watched this episode, and that uses exactly the same narrative. Meanwhile, Jack reaches out with his mind into one of the crew, just as the crew member is shot, and he wants to give himself up, but obviously Picard and Beverly tell him no. Vadic will just kill everyone anyway, nothing will be achieved, whatever he does, and this is where he discloses this power he has. Vadic says that she'll kill one member of the crew for every 10 minutes that Jack doesn't come to the bridge, just as Jack reaches into one of the members of the bridge crew to try and make him input a number to give them control of the Titan. Vadic catches it, stops it, but for some reason isn't surprised that Jack can do this, and then starts playing a game of execution, pretending she's going to execute one person, pretend she's going to execute another, and then finally executing a third. And the person she executed was quite a surprise. I don't know the character's name. She's the Vulcan, or the bold Vulcan off the bridge, who's had a relatively prominent role. So that quite surprised me. I was expecting it to be one of the B characters, because there's a character on there, or a couple, I'd not seen before, and they seemed to be hovering on that person's, almost insinuating that was the person who was going to die. But no, she killed someone who wasn't part of the main cast, but was still a major player. Picard and group hear this over the intercom. They come to the realisation that they can't do anything on their own, so they go and find Data, LaForge and daughter number 2. I found that a little bit strange, because the changelings are supposed to be all over the ship, or at least control of a lot of the ship, but they just seemed to wander in and make their way, and it was fine. Again, Geordi explains that Law's one half of the brain, Data's the other, and if he takes down the barrier, Law will win the fight for control. They realise they have no other choice, they can't do anything about Vadic, so that's what they're going to do. Meanwhile, Jack says he will delay them, and he leaves. They lower the barrier between Law and Data, and we have a scene within Data's head, a conflict of minds, if you like, where it's underlined that Data will not kill. It's inherent in his programming not to kill, whilst Law is more than happy to kill, and survival is his prime directive, if you like. Jack goes to the bridge and holds up a weapon, an orb, which obviously is a bomb, and basically tells them, it won't kill you, but it will kill me, and you want me, so tell me what's going on. Vadic sends most of the crew off the bridge to lock them in the ready room. Seven doesn't go with them. There's an earlier exchange actually between Seven and Shaw, where Shaw's telling her she should have blown up the turbo lift, and there will be consequences for that. It's nice to see that even through all this, that relationship isn't softening, because that would have been a bit of an easy fix, and I quite like the fact that he still has this contempt for her, still doesn't see her as a proper Starfleet officer. And given revelations in a previous episode, some of that may stem from her connection to the Borg. So Vadic dances around telling Jack what's happening, talks about the door he keeps seeing, you got the question, how does she know, and says certain things about the voices in his head, you've always felt alone. I mean, it leans very heavily towards him being a Borg. It's not implicit, but it feels that that's the way it's going. Even though all his visions are in red, I think that's intentional to mislead. Just my theory, and again, I might be proved wrong, like I was with the DNA thing. Earlier on there was a scene between Riker and Deanna, and this recurs through the episode, where they're talking about their relationship, talking about what happened, talking about the death of their son, and it turns out Deanna took Will's pain away, which meant he couldn't feel anything, and he couldn't be around her. Which is interesting, because I didn't know that's what happened. It's a thing done from a position of love and care, but it's quite an intrusive thing to do to somebody. You know, humans have to experience pain, they have to experience grief, and they have to go through it. And his response is, you took the only thing I had left of him, was his grief. So there's some back and forth between them, and then they get rescued by Worf and Raffi, because somehow they're shuttle cloaks. I'm not sure when that happened. That feels very much like a MacGuffin just thrown in. I don't recall that ever being mentioned. I might be wrong. They discover Picard's body and that something's been removed, and Raffi downloads the database and the information of what that is. We still don't hear what it is. This was frustrating to me. The end of the last episode promised an explanation, and it doesn't happen. And then the end of this episode promises an explanation. And that's just a little bit annoying to me. It's like you built up to this episode and then you just don't do what you said you were going to do. Meanwhile, Data and Lore are having this battle. Lore's winning, obviously. Data is basically clinging onto memories, and every memory he brings and visualizes, Lore takes away and destroys. And there was quite a nice little moment where you see the Tasha Yar hologram. Lore's completely winning, and I kind of figured out what was happening here, and it was quite a nice, clever little moment, because Data was giving Lore his memories, and his memories are the things that make Data who he is. So he was basically taking over Lore. And the final memory is of Spot, and Data disappears. Lore thinks he's won, he's stroking Spot, and suddenly realises, as he starts to glitch, that something's gone wrong. And he and Data embrace and say goodbye, and Data awakes. But he's not Data as we knew, not totally. He's something different, he's someone different, but still intrinsically Data. This idea of winning by surrendering seems really familiar to me. He awakes, takes control of the ship, and as he does so, Jack dashes over to Seven and presses the button. And it turns out this device, rather than being a bomb, is a force field generator. They then open the shields at the front of the ship. Vadic and the big guy are sucked into space. And obviously in the colder space, Vadic freezes and shatters on the Shrike. While all this is happening, Worf, Raffi, Riker and Deanna have come on board the Titan. And Raffi fights her way through some changelings whilst Worf's kind of just watching, and then gives her a critique of her fighting style. Deanna gets very woozy and realises that there's something really dark on this ship. So they've reclaimed the ship. Not sure what happens to the rest of the changelings. I presume Raffi, Worf and the remaining crew finish them off. Shaw takes his chair again. There's a small glimmer of respect between Shaw and Seven when he tells her the honour is hers. And they destroy the Shrike and fly away. There's a nice little almost comedic scene where the crew of the Next Generation all sit around a table. A few light moments, a few emotional moments. It's quite nice to see. Obviously it's a nice nostalgia nod. And they discuss the fact that the situation with Jack has to be dealt with because Deanna says again there's a darkness around him. So she goes to speak to Jack and she does a session with him where she enters his mind, which is not something I knew Beta Zeds could do. I thought they just connected to emotions. They were empathic. So the thing earlier with Will was a little weird as well, but maybe I just forgot that. She tells Jack to open the door. He doesn't want to. Then you get the psychological projection of her standing next to him. And the final shot is his hand on the doorknob. So as I say, again, we're not going to have an explanation for Jack until the next episode. I found that a little frustrating. Not that I didn't enjoy the episode, but you've literally just ended 2 episodes with exactly the same cliffhanger moment. You know, the promise of who is Jack, what's the mystery. There are a couple of MacGuffins, or certainly elements that felt like that, which is unusual because this series has been very good at setting things up. It's been one of the things I've complimented previously. It's entirely possible it's something I missed, or it might be a throwback, but it didn't detract for me. I still really enjoyed it. I like the way the lightness of touch with some of the characters counterbalances some of the really dark moments, and there's a lot of dark moments in this series. And again, the character work is great. The character work with Vadic. There's a lovely moment between Data and Geordi, and everybody really is on form. It's nice to see Riker back in the show after being absent last week. And again, he and Deanna, their interaction's great. And there's quite a funny moment where Worf's almost flirting with her when he rescues them in Worf's own way. And that was quite amusing. It seems almost like Worf is becoming the comic relief, which I think sits with him quite well. So all in all, another good episode. I am excited to know what happens in the next episode. And I hope they don't pull the rug out again and do exactly the same thing at the end of the next one of saying, we'll find out what Jack's secret is again. I don't think they will. I've heard something about the 9th episode, not detail, but I've heard something that I think means it will be explained. So that's something to look forward to. It's really cool to be excited about watching the next episode of a series. I guess when you binge watch things, you don't really have that. You just watch the next episode. There's no anticipation, although that can lead to very late nights. Anyway, I'll leave that one there. If you have any thoughts or comments, I'd be interested to hear them. And if you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe. Thank you very much for listening, and peace out.